Sweet. So now that we finished up our first sprint, let's go ahead and work on our next sprint, which is very similar to the first sprint. There are a few minor differences now that we accomplished a little bit of work that I want to describe to you guys. So again, we go through the same process of doing the sprint planning. We pick up a feature, and let's say in this case, we decide to work on feature number 2. So the developers, they begin working on feature number 2, and they're gonna work on it for the rest of the week if your sprints are 1 week long. Now, the reason I put some bug fixes here in random places is along the way, as they're pushing code to dev and test, you're going to find the bugs and you're going to report them, and the developers are going to fix them. The idea here is that you want to flush out all of the bugs before they get to the production, right? You don't want them in production because you don't want the client seeing the bugs. You want to flush them out all in dev and test. Dev and test bugs are okay. So now anyways, the developers are developing their code, and you're going to start working on your test cases for this feature. And let's say, you have one test case here that you're working on, and you keep working on and working on it. Now, the main difference here now is that you have a regression suite that's going to run every single night to make sure that all of your features are working. So for example, if the developers wrote some code here and committed that code to the code base, your regression suite is going to run against that code base and make sure that what they did that day did not break what you had accomplished in this week right here in sprint number 1. Now, ideally, this should be fully automated. If you work at a place where this is fully automated and your regression runs as soon as the developer commits code, that is fantastic. You never have to worry about that. But some of us are not so lucky. And the very common scenario is where we set up scheduled tasks that run our regression suite every single night. We show up in the morning, we check the regression suite, we see what failed, and then we report it to the team. Of course, you guys will get to see all of that with those automation frameworks that we are going to set up. But anyway, so I was just giving you the ideal situation of what would be happening in the perfect world. But in our world, we're having the regression run every night, and it's testing the code that was worked on during this time frame. So every single night it's running, and every single night it's testing that what was added that day did not break anything from this day and anything before. So the regression keeps running. You keep on working on your test, and at the end of Thursday, theoretically, your developer should say, hey, the code is ready on test. You can run your automated checks against that feature. Maybe a few manual. At my current job, we try to automate everything. We don't want anything manual. And so you run your automated checks against that code. Make sure it passes. If it does, on Friday, you move to production, just like you did the day before. You're going to run your automated tests against production. Once the code is there, you're going to make sure that it passes. Theoretically, you're not going to have any bugs because you did such a great job with your automated tests here. And afterwards, the regression suite that you've been adding to is going to continue to run every single night, day in and day out. On the weekends, when you're not there, when you're not working, the regression suite will be working for you, which is one of the benefits of automated testing, which we'll get into in a little bit. Also, one other suite that I did not mention is a smoke test suite that is also running along with the regression suite. I personally like to run the smoke test suite every hour to make sure that all of the major features are working. So actually, probably the test case that we created here would be added to the smoke test suite. That's actually one of my rules that I would recommend to you guys, which we'll talk about in the future, but it's that the first test cases you create are the smoke tests. You pick the low-hanging fruit, the easiest test case to create that give the biggest bang for the buck. So these probably would have been added to the smoke test suite, and they would have been running on a regular basis, every hour usually, or ideally, automatically, anytime there is a commit, a smoke test can be ran. Like I said, if you have that set up, in your continuous integration environment, that's fantastic. If you don't, I recommend you run it every single hour to make sure your features are working. And we'll get into all that when we get to develop those amazing frameworks.